Welcome to Made in Moray, the podcast that focuses on the successes and struggles of local businesses. Let's get started.
My name's G. I'm your host, and today I have the pleasure of time with Zafar Ali, who is the owner of Buckie Furniture, Flooring and Mobility. The company is a family-run business that specializes in home interior supplies and is this year celebrating 40 years of trade. Did I get it right?
Yes, you got it right, yeah. Absolutely spot on.
Fantastic. And I wanted to say good evening to you, and thanks for inviting me to your place here. I really appreciate it.
Not at all.
There's just one thing we need to improve, which is the weather, right?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not in control of that, so...
No. We've had a couple of good weeks, but today's just like a storm out there. Anyway, let's get into the flooring, mobility, and furniture. So, how did the business originate? Where did it come from?
Well, it's quite a funny story. Many years ago, we used to have a clothes shop in Elgin, and a gentleman approached us asking if he wanted to purchase the place. The fact was the store wasn't actually up for sale, but he made a very, very good offer. And my father said, well, if the money's right, I'll consider it. Mm-hmm. And Dad was always looking for making money, so he said, yeah, sure. Fine, okay, name your price. And they came to an agreement, and Dad said, yeah, fine. I phoned the bank, and they said, get it in writing as quick as you can before he changes his mind. Mm-hmm. And the following day, he came back and said, well, it's not high enough. Wow. And Dad turned around and said, well, what is it you want it for? And he said, well, I want him to do carpets. Mm-hmm. Well, we really didn't know anything about carpets at the time, but... Dad said to him, well, would you be interested in a place in Buckie? Because there had been a local family store by the name of First Furnitures who had been up for rental for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And the guy went, yeah, sure, I'd be interested in Buckie. So Dad thought to himself, as he always does, I can make a quick buck here. The guy's looking for a place. I can put two and two together. It had been in the paper every week for years. Nobody really wanted it. And so Dad made an approach, got it, and had every intention of passing it on to this guy at a profit. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately what happened was the chap found another place, and as Dad turned around to him and said to him, I've got this place, he went, well, I've already got another place.
Right.
So Dad got stuck between a rock and a hard place. He now then inherited this furniture and flooring store, which was a complete house furniture, which came with office staff, carpet fitters and everything. And my dad knew nothing about the business at all. So he panicked. He knew of a guy who had been in furniture and flooring, mm-hmm. who recently lost his job due to drink driving, okay. but at least he would guide Dad the right way. So mm-hmm. he employed him, and he in turn employed a secretary from one of the other furniture and flooring firms. Okay. And bingo, that's how we got into the business.
So if I understand it, your dad was trying to broker a deal for somebody else, basically. Correct. And then he kind of got stuck in the middle.
Yes.
And was like, okay, there's only one way to go. I'm just going to dive in head first and see if I can run it myself. And bang, it all started.
Yep. We happened to be very lucky. The fact was the store was an old store. Mm-hmm. There was no enthusiasm. It was dull. It was grey, and not to miscry anyone by any means. Mm-hmm. Times, it was stuck in the past.
Right, as a lot of businesses are over time.
Yeah, I think they really needed a revamp of some kind. I think with Dad coming in, mm-hmm. and some fresh faces coming in as well, it changed the whole environment.
So, what was your dad's background? Because your family is not originally from this area.
No, my dad is originally from Pakistan.
Right.
So my father came from Pakistan, which is 6,500 miles away, right. to Scotland.
which is not really a sort of direct
No, it's
route.
not. He also came up to the northeast of Scotland on his first time. He didn't really move either, which I find very unusual because the majority of Asians that came here normally would stay at the port or stay together.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad came to Lossiemouth originally because his uncle was there.
Wow, yeah, there was that local book about memories that,
Yes.
I saw
Yeah.
in your office, and I was reading through that, and there's a little bit of the story that that he traveled, and then his wife came after him a little bit,
Yeah.
and what was it? What was it like for him to come here?
A culture shock.
Wow, yeah,
A massive culture shock. The weather's very different. The people are very different. The food's very different. Everything's different.
yep.
My dad really didn't have much of an education, so he left school at a very young age.
Yeah. And he came here when he was quite young.
Yeah,
right?
he came here when he was about 15.
Right. Wow. And so did he have some kind of education before he came here? And did he come here alone?
Yeah, he came here alone.
Oh my goodness, that's a long way. That's a long way to travel.
He had a basic education, but nothing with any sort of qualifications to lead for it.
Yeah. Do you think that gave him some kind of drive to prove himself, maybe?
I think one of the biggest driving factors for my father was the fact that my grandfather was a Vice Lord Provost of a very, very small village.
Right.
And my grandfather had said to him when he left, he would write him letters. And they were all from this very council-orientated background. How is your village? What have you done for it? How that style of thing. How are you mixing with the community? Of course, Dad would never always tell him the truth, because when you left, you always want to say it's a bed of roses, because my grandfather was very much against my father leaving.
Right. So he came here. Did he speak the language?
Yes, English is a second language in Pakistan.
Did he understand the Scots version of English?
That's a very good question. I think the majority he did pick up, but body expressions speak an awful lot more than language.
Yep. That's quite right. And I guess if you're living within the culture, you pick it up quite quickly.
I mean, very quickly. I mean, English is a very easy language to learn. If you compare it to all the other languages, English is very, very easy to learn.
Yeah. And in that story about your dad that was in the book, he started by going door to door selling?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and then he sort of built up a business slowly over a period of time.
Yeah, after he did the door-to-door selling, I mean, it was difficult to get trade as a door-to-door salesman. So the only way to get sales basically was basically to give credit, because people could afford to buy parts. I mean, at the end of the day, if you wanted to buy clothes, you could go to any of the shops. Why would you need to get a guy that came round the door? But the stuff that Dad had was slightly different, and we're talking about the late 50s, where everything's dull and grey and boring, and fashion hasn't really come into it. Yep. I mean, if your trousers were black, your shirt was white, everybody wore the same. There was no such thing as fashion, because fashion didn't really come into play until the late 70s.
Okay.
And so you're pretty comfortable with what you sort of wore. If nothing was matching, nobody was going to say anything to you. But Dad had stuff coming from India and China, which the local stores didn't actually have access to.
Okay.
And things like Lulu in the 70s and the 60s and the 70s, and all the bright red hot pants and things like that. Dad had all that stuff. So it was, stuff that was on TV that was in London, but not up here. Definitely not up here.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you're an independent tradesperson, you can get things quickly, or you can change what you're selling, or you can adapt and improvise.
My uncles were importers, exporters, so that helped quite a bit.
a little bit of knowledge in the background.
Yes.
There.
Yeah.
Maybe helping out. Wow.
And he got a lot of help from my grandfather as well.
Mm.
Well, my so-called grandfather, who was my grandfather's best friend. But I didn't see my grandfather very often. I only seen him 3 times. Well, twice in my life.
Wow.
My dad only seen him 3 times after he left.
Okay, wow. And how did you fit into the business? Did you grow up with your father running the business?
Yes. My grandfather was my grandfather's best friend, who I call my grandfather and I always regard as my grandfather, including my real grandfather, was already in business and helped my dad. And he used to run a grocers and drapers during the war.
Right.
So ever since I've been little, I've seen business, and it's always the old-fashioned style of open all hours where the house is next door to the shop. Hence the reason for the house being next door to the shop.
Yeah. So did you find yourself as a kid sort of helping out around?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, Dad pulled you in all the time. You know, I was a protege anyway. But I mean, yes, we helped out in everything. I mean, school holidays you were working, Saturdays you were working.
Yeah.
You know, in the evening you were working. You know, and you know, my whole ethos was to make my parents proud, or to make my parents a name for themselves. And it's always been like that. And it's never been about ourselves or the family, the close family. It's always been about, you know, my parents had to, well, I needed to make them proud.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that my father got sometimes looked down on sometimes in life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really wanted to put across. I really wanted to change that thought.
Mm. How was it being maybe an outsider coming into a community like this?
Well, it's just like everything else, you know. There's good and bad in every community, mm-hmm. and it's the same as anything else. It's generalization. There are more good people than there are bad people. Mm-hmm. You are going to occasionally get some bad people, but they're not reflective of the whole of society. Yeah. Overall, most people were very, very good, very accommodating.
It's nice to hear. What's changed?
That's why we're still here.
Then? Okay. Yeah. It's hard for me. I only came back here to this part of the world for a shorter period of time, and I'm like, it's going to be hard to leave now because there is a sort of community feeling here.
Well, every community is tighter and tighter the smaller it is, and if you happen to be outside the norm, then you're different. And you get viewed different, and you're not run of the mill. You're not the majority of people in Buckie were fishermen. My dad's definitely not a fisherman. He was a businessman. Okay. He knew nothing about fish or water or sea boats or anything like that, but he knew how to sell.
And I think that's important in any community to have that sort of businessman sort of mentality who's able to provide a service that he knows that people actually need. What's changed then over the time that the business has been running? Because that's kind of like a half a lifetime, right? Talking 40 years.
Yes. Well, I mean, obviously computers.
Right. Wow.
Internet has, and the pace of ordering, the pace of delivery, all that's really, really changed phenomenally. And the speed at which business is done is just, finger clicks, and time is phenomenal compared to the old days.
So how did you find that personally transitioning into a digital environment with the business? Is that something that's easy to do? I imagine not.
Well, for me, I was very lucky. I was... in the 80s, the big toy of the day used to be the plug-in computer into the television.
Okay.
Commodore 64, Amiga.
I remember
Nintendo.
I remember the Commodore 64.
Yeah. So I mean that in those day and ages, in Christmas particularly, that was a big toy to have. That was a toy of the year. I didn't know very much about computers at the time, but I found them fascinating. So I started to do a little bit of research then, and I knew there was two types of computer. There was one that was dedicated games one, and there's one that could do business and do computer games. So I thought to myself, well, why waste money on one that just does computer games? Why don't I do one that does a bit of both?
Yep.
And then we could, and you know, it's the age-old story. It's the computer toy of the year. After 6 or 9 months, it's been kicked off to the side, but I was still interested in it. So I had an early learning into computers at a very early age because I just stuck with it all the way through. And I think that made it easier for my dad. I remember when we first put the PC into the store, there was nothing but massive resentment because
seriously,
yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you know, the carpet fitters thought they were going to lose their job. They were pulling plugs out, taking fuses out. They were banging on the desk so it would go wrong. They were sensitive in those days, so a couple of bangs and it wouldn't work. And I thought, wow, you know, what is going on? You know, and I told them, you know, this is going to be the way forward. You're not going to be able to live without these things, and I've been proven right. But I mean, it was quite funny because I was quoting Bill Gates at the time, you know, computer on every desk. Yep. And over time, you know, I think because we were so far in advance of ourselves, it fitted in lovely, you know. Yeah.
Well, I think adapting and integrating the technology into the business is extremely important, and I think we've seen that over the last 6 months with the way businesses have had to change very quickly as well into the digital sphere, that a lot of people, if they don't change, will just be left behind.
But we were lucky because Dan and I were kind of a unit, so you know, that balance was brilliant, where you had the voice of reason and the voice of experience versus the young voice. So you had that, both that young growth sector coming in, and you also had the voice of reasoning there, and that's very unusual to have in a business. So we were very privileged.
Yeah. What's it like then working so close within a family? Because a lot of families just can't do it, right?
Yes, you're right. And family environment can be extremely difficult. I was around my parents 24/7. I think more than most people, which is why I miss them so much. I would have breakfast with my parents, even though I was married. I would have lunch with my parents. I would have supper with my parents. I spent time in the evening with my parents. Wow. I worked with my father during the day. As you know, we had an Indian restaurant in Buckie as well. So I mean, as soon as we finished working the furniture and flooring, we went straight to work in the restaurant. And you know, we worked long hours, long days. But yeah, we came from a family that worked. And we watched a family at work, so it was quite easy. As long as everybody's got their roles and sticks to them, that's the most important thing. I think it's when everybody wants to be the boss that the whole thing falls apart. And like I said, my grandfather came from Lossiemouth, and you know, he'd watched the RAF at work or the Navy at work, and he was like huge in the military and organisational structure, and it was quite amazing. And that was passed on to my father.
Wow. 2 businesses, you said there. So you'd have one business during the day and you'd finish that and you'd go into work in a second business.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you have any free time at all? I mean, how did you manage that?
That's a very good question, actually.
Because I would go crazy, right? Personally.
Well, you know, so things needs must.
Right.
You know, you know, and you know, a lot of people speak about business and where they start from and why they want to do it. Ours was born out of need and necessity. So basically, that was our starting point. And like I say, you know, we never like failure. Nobody likes failure. And once you got your noose round the neck sort of thing, like the business round your neck, you can't run away from it. It's going to be there permanently.
Oh, yeah. Were there any conflicts because you were working so close together, or how did you deal with pressure and stress?
That's a very good question.
You don't have to. You don't have to answer that.
Yes, yeah. You know, you learn from the masters before you.
Right.
You know, and one of my big, huge inspirations is Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
And you know, you have to learn to let things go. And if you're working in a family unit, not only are you working as a business unit, but after business is finished, you're still the son, the daughter, the nephew, the niece, the granddad. You're still having that environment.
Okay.
I mean, the thing about us as a particular family unit, I think, is Dad didn't have an awful lot of friends.
Right.
And his family was his whole life. And I think perhaps maybe if he had a lot more friends, and if he was more outgoing, and times change. I mean, I've got all that, but he didn't have all that.
Yeah.
His whole life was dedicated to our family.
Wow. Do you think that maybe you saw that within him, and not only did you just pick up the skills that he had being around him, but you also realized that you needed more? If you're going to be successful, I think you need a network as much as anything else.
Absolutely. I had an education. My dad didn't have an education.
Yep.
I grew up here, so I had my dad's original intention was basically to come here, make money, and then go home.
Right.
The trouble is we got in the way, and we made friends. And I remember, Dad said, "Well, I've made enough money. I want to go home now." Well, we don't want to leave. We made friends.
Yeah.
And he would say, "Well, we can get friends back home." And go, "Well, no, but we'll have to start all over again. We're going to have to learn the language, learn the lingo, And that was at a young age, so you can imagine what my dad thought when, because he'd gone all through that at 15, or 14, 15.
Yeah.
And he was asking us when we were about 10.
Right. So from his perspective, it was something that he'd done so that everybody could maybe do, but maybe times change.
Yeah.
Times change.
Yeah.
Once you put roots down somewhere, it's quite hard to pick them up sometimes. So jumping forward to now, the big elephant in the room is the present health crisis and how it's affected local businesses. So how has this been for you, for example, like when it started? Did you have to adapt? Did you have to change? Were you ready?
You're talking about the COVID situation, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the COVID situation.
Because I call it a health crisis because
it is a health crisis.
I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah. Well, we weren't prepared for that, and it's a long-standing business. When we heard all this stuff on the news, which everybody was hearing, we did the usual thing, which I think a lot of the businesses up here tend to do. It's in the city. It's not going to touch us. It's not going to harm us. It's happening down in England, in London, Edinburgh, Glasgow. We're too far north for anything like that to happen. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly the reality starts kicking in. And to be honest, there was no warning. There was no, things were slightly getting worse. But the fact that we actually had to close is a very, very difficult thing for an entrepreneur with a long-standing business, because your reputation's at stake.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we didn't want to do was close suddenly, because this crisis had come up, but we had outstanding orders, as everybody had, as any regular company was, and that raised a debate about how do you speak to your customers very quickly?
Yep.
And that's not easy, because most people were at work, and then the sudden close down meant that you could phone companies. You didn't know what, and people weren't even answering phones because they thought they might get COVID off the mobile phone. I mean, people were ill prepared for it themselves. They were looking for guidance from the government, and it hadn't quite come at that time. Basically, all they were doing was running around saying, close down, this thing's going to get worse. And you'd seen it happen in other countries. And suddenly it went from China to becoming a global crisis to suddenly hitting Scotland. And then, bingo, next thing you know, it's hitting America. So it was the speed of the thing that caught us off guard more than anything else. Yeah,
and for businesses that are walk-in businesses on a high street, businesses that rely on local customers sometimes coming in and picking up things that they need, they must be hardest hit by this.
Well, we got caught slightly particularly badly because we were in the middle of developing our website at the time. Now, we've had a website for a long time, We set up our very first website in 1999 with a .com one, and things change.
Try to remember 1999.
Things change over a period of time, and at that particular time, it was called a 3-piece suite.
Right.
So we decided to call our website Suite Savers.
Right.
But then during a period of time, DFS decided to market sofas and cut out the price of the chairs to make them look cheaper. And suddenly the word suites were associated with hotel rooms.
Okay.
But of course, we had now registered the name Suite Savers, so that became a bit difficult because we had it on the business cards and everything. So
Right.
we had it on the side of the vans and everything. So we had to have a rethink again. And we've had a bad run with websites. You know, always hear the positive story about websites. We had a couple of companies that just didn't do what they said, or they didn't do what they would do in the tin.
Right.
You got grants for websites. Some of the companies took the grants and just did absolutely nothing.
That's crazy.
And then you were sitting here thinking to yourself, well, I don't know what to do. So I was assumed they're going to phone me, or I phoned them, and they said, yeah, we'll phone you back in 4 weeks' time. We're really, really busy now. And that 4 or 5 months later, you still hadn't got a phone call. So, like you say, they took the money and didn't do anything.
I hate it when people say, I'm going to get back to you, or I'll get back to you in 24 hours. Or even last week, somebody said, I'll get back to you on Monday. And they never called me. They didn't even send a message. And I was like, It's really, really frustrating. But I have to say that today I was on your website, and I was like, wow, this is just tip top. This looks fantastic. So how did you get through those struggles to get to the point right now where it really does look great?
Well, I have a very good friend who's a one-man business,
Right.
who's a good friend of mine, and I've known for many years, who lost his job, a guy called Sean Moat from Murray Digital.
All right.
And he set up on his own. And I've known Sean for many, many years because he used to be a rep for the newspapers, and he passed out in my shop a couple of times. I saved his life, but that's by the by. I called the ambulance at the right time.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, seriously, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Seriously. So,
You actually mean like physically sort of passed out?
yeah, physically, he was speaking to me one minute, next minute he was in pain, next minute I thought to myself, I'm not going to put up with this because if he dies here, I'll never be able to forgive myself. So I thought, well, you know what, I either make a 999 call, get the ambulance here, or I just don't bother. So I thought, right, well, phone the ambulance, get something done quick.
Yeah, you don't want to be known as that place where
yeah, exactly.
that thing happened.
So yeah, so he's small, and you know, I mean, a lot of people think you've got to be big.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people don't forget is you've always got to start small.
Yep.
And that's the bit. Everybody wants to get instantaneously on that graph to instant profits, but it takes a long, long time.
Oh yeah. You got to build up your reputation. You got to work on the skills that you need to develop, and that doesn't happen when, you know, as we previously talked about, these companies who didn't do what they say they were going to do. You can't really have a future.
That's why we chose our logo: rest on our reputation, sleep on our experience.
So, say that again.
Rest on our reputation, sleep on our experience.
That's nice.
And we just thought that had that ring to it. I mean, you know, it just says everything that we want to commit to.
Oh yeah. That's great. That's great. Is that like on your shop, your business cards or stuff like that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's really cool. Who came up with that?
Well, actually, we nicked it, actually, to be honest. If I'm absolutely honest.
Borrowed.
We got permission to use it. So it was one of our associate bed companies that used to have it as our logo. Yeah. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was brilliant. So I phoned the director up and I said, listen, I absolutely love this logo. Can I use it even though I don't advertise your beds? And he turned around and said, well, we're actually thinking about dropping it.
Oh, wow.
And I went, really? I went, well, if that's the case, can I use it then? Yeah. And he said, well, yeah. He says, we own the copyright. He goes, well, if you give me the right to use it and you're thinking about dropping it, I'd be more than interested. And he went, you know what? I'll drop you an email in a couple of minutes. And bingo, woof, that was it.
Wow. Wow, that's nice. That's nice. So how has it been recently trying to connect with the customers and inform them of what's happening?
We have always been connected to our customers.
Right.
Always, always, always. You're next door here.
Yeah.
We're the only furniture store that is actually right next door to the furniture store.
Yeah, you know, that's a message to people, right? The fact that you're prepared to actually live next to your store, the place where you work. I mean, it's a sign of commitment.
And you know, everyone knows where we are locally. We're right next door. We can be approached at any time, and we know that within reason, of course. We're not going to answer the door at 11 o'clock at night, you know. But you know,
Yeah, I get it.
out with business hours. If I'm not doing anything, I'm sitting here, and I'm quite happily open the shop and let people. We've been doing VIP appointments long before COVID, and we kept saying that to people. The offer's always there. If you are husband and wife and you're working and you can't manage, just give us a call. We'll arrange an evening. We're doing this tonight, but you know, I could quite easily, you know.
That's a great point. That's a great
And I mean,
point.
there's nothing better than a VIP appointment. You've got the store to yourself.
Wow.
No interference with phone calls, no
Yeah.
people running about, no deliveries, no staff. That store's yours. You know, for the time that you choose. That's your store.
And that can be done in this part of the world.
Yeah, and I mean the thing is, like I said to you before, we actively promote that, and have been long before COVID. Many years before COVID, people could knock on the door and just ask anything they want, and we're quite open. You know, like I said to you, we're used to working long hours. It's not really a big issue for me. But also, you know, we encourage WhatsApp. Our mobile numbers are always handed out when we did a sale. We always give people our business cards. Our mobile numbers are on there.
Yep.
Our emails are on there. And you know, people can text. They're not always going to get an immediate answer, but they will get an answer.
I also noticed on Facebook that you have a 5-star review as well.
That's really for the customers to judge and not for me to say.
Yeah, well, I was reading through, because, you know, I do my little research and I go to the website and I go to Facebook and I read through what people wrote, and the people here seem to feel that the store is able to provide something different, something special.
Well, we'd like to. I mean, there are a lot of furniture stores. Let's be absolutely honest. You know, we have to gear it to being something different.
Yep.
I love my humour. I love seeing customers. You know, from an early age, I've been taught your customers are your life and blood.
Yeah.
And you know, no customers, no money. You know,
Absolutely.
And you know, I remember my uncle once. I was about 18 at the time. And my uncle's had a massive warehouse, an import-export in Glasgow. And I vividly remember at the age of 18 that he kicked down all the stools as the guys were trying to have a cup of coffee. And this was about the 40th cup of coffee they'd tried to make. And I'll never forget what he said. Because I was quite shocked. And he turned around and went, "What are you guys doing?" And they went, we're trying to have a cup of coffee, sir." And he went, "Well, that's what you've got a house for." There's customers walking about and you guys are sitting down having a cup of coffee. But this is about the 40th cup of coffee. We've been so busy. Well, you should be thankful then. You should be thankful you've actually got a home that you can actually make a cup of coffee in. Because how do you get that house? How do you get that cup of coffee? It's because the customers are here. If you're going to ignore the customers, you might as well not stay outside.
Yep. It's another great point. I mean, I remember in my life, I've been in big stores so many times, and you feel like you have to chase some of the staff to get their attention sometimes.
Well, we like to leave we like to inform our customers that we're actually there. We still like the old-fashioned service. We're here if you need us, but you're feel free to have a look around if you want. And if you've got any questions, there's no hard sales. Just give us a shout. It's
good to know that shops, services, you know, companies like that still exist, because sometimes in the internet-based world, it's so impersonal, it's so distant, it's so cold sometimes.
It is. I mean, you know, you're not I mean, I'll give you an example, and this is one that I think I can quote, and this is my own experience. It's a younger generation thing. My young son is now 20, and I'll never forget that our fridge freezer broke down.
Okay.
And I said to my wife, go local.
Right.
Don't go to multiples. Go local. You'll get well looked after if you go local.
Yep.
And she turned around, and before I could say anything, my son turned around. Well, you could go to that A0. Let's go. And I went to him, what? And he went, you could go to that A0. Let's go. I goes to him, why would we want to do that? And he goes, well, it's on during the X Factor, and they say A0. Let's go. I went, I'm not going to buy a fridge freezer based on the fact that the fridge freezer does not sing. I'm not going to buy a fridge freezer on the fact that it's on in the advert between X Factor.
Yeah.
So I said to him, who owns A0? Let's go. And before I could turn my back, I was hoping to sort of stumble him for a wee while. He'd already been on Google and checked it all out. So he'd already told me who the guy was, what his age was, and how many millions the company was worth, and what the profit and losses were for the last 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And I said to him, but where does he stay? And he went, well, yeah. And he showed me a picture of where he stayed. I went, yeah, that's good. That's handy. It's a big mansion, yeah. It says, I can see the helicopter and the cars parked.
Yeah.
But do you know him?
Yeah.
And he went, no. He said, well, that's my point.
Right.
Will he come and pick up my freezer for me, my old freezer? I know the guy up the road, and I know damn fine that he does a personal service just like me. And you know something? I know damn fine that if I was really needing it and something went wrong with my freezer, I could pop round and see him, and he would say, no problem.
Yeah.
I'll sort you out.
Yeah. I remember many, many years ago going out camping somewhere locally here, around here, and didn't have any food because I was totally young and stupid and totally unprepared. And I asked somebody, and someone said, "Oh, just go and see the butcher." And I was like, "But it was something like 9, 10 o'clock at night, and it's like the butcher's going to be closed. Oh no, go around to the back door and knock on the back door, and he'll be there." And I was obviously very hungry at the time, and I was like, okay, I'll try anything once, and went round to the back of his house, knocked on the door. Friendliest guy you could ever meet, saying, "Oh yeah, no problem. Come with me. I'll open up. What do you need? We'll look in the freezer and whatever." And that's missing from a lot of the world. Right?
I remember reading a story in the Press and Journal, and it sort of like stuck with me for quite some time. And it may have not been the Press and Journal, actually, now that I think about it. It was a story about a famous actress who withheld her name, obviously, because of her fame, who grew up, and her early beginnings were very interesting. She'd lost her father, her mother had cancer, and she had 2 young siblings, and she came from a small village, and like I say, the name wasn't given, but she was going on about shopping local, and she turned around and said that everybody knew her in the village and everybody knew her predicament. But because of her mother's situation and the fact that she was bedridden, she had to look after the other 2 siblings. But apart from looking after the other 2 siblings, she had to do all the shopping herself as well, and that's including going to school herself and looking after the other 2. And she said in this article that when she went for, just like what you said, she went to the butcher would always say, "How's your mum?"
Yeah.
And then he'd look at her and say, all right, he'd realised that what the current situation was, so he'd add a couple of wee bits of extra beef on. Yeah. Or if they were at the dairy, the guy that was measuring the cheese would sort of turn around and look at her, sympathise, and move the cheese up a little bit and cut the extra cheese off. And she said, nowadays you go into the supermarkets all pre-packaged, you get what you actually pay for. And there's none of that. There's no contact. Nobody asks you. I mean, never mind that. You've got contactless shopping. Never mind nothing else.
Yeah, it's crazy. If I think about growing up in this region and the little shops that used to exist that don't exist anymore, it's quite interesting the changes that have occurred. My parents live in a little village near here, and there was a butcher, and there was a post office, and there was a paper shop, and there was a little place selling wool and needles and thread, and there was somebody who would fix your car or have a look at it. And now I'm not sure any of those things exist anymore.
Well, a lot of it is to do with likes of transport and lack of services, and also to do with links and transport links. As a links, I mean, let's just take the road from Buckie to Elgin, for example. Right. I've been travelling that road for many years. Yeah. Now, you used to go between. You used to go into Fochabers, you used to go into Mistodlig, you used to go into Lambride.
That's so true.
And now you're on the bypass. You go from Buckie straight to Elgin. And you don't see that wee shops that you used to see. And, you know, when you used to turn around and say you're going through Mistodlig, I'll stop at the local shop because I'll need a bunch of sweeties or something. Now you just say I go to Asda. Yeah. And it's the difference between going to the small store and especially in grocery, going to the bigger store and getting what you think is a better price.
Yeah. Well, talking about changes, when you were younger, could you see yourself doing what it is that you're doing now? Do you think it was like a destiny thing? Do you think it was always going to be like that?
I knew I was always groomed for business.
Okay.
But I never realised where it was going to go.
Okay. So did you think that you were going to be staying here? Was it always a plan that you'd sort of take over the business?
I'm from an Asian family, you know, and basically I'm the only son. I have 5 sisters, so there was nobody else but me, and I'm also the eldest. So
big responsibilities.
Then. Yeah, big responsibility. Eldest, only son. You were deemed to take over that business, but. I had ideas like everybody else. You know, the one thing I wanted to do was go out and see the world. Yeah. I didn't want to stay in Buckie. I wanted to go out and see the big smoke, see what it was like everywhere else. I did accountancy. I trained in accountancy. Yeah. I went to Aberdeen. My parents didn't really want me to go. Yeah. But like every other family, you don't want your son or daughter leaving the nest, and especially if you're the protege, you definitely don't want him leaving.
Yeah.
But like everything else, you know, you have to go out and you have to have an adventure. And my dad was advised by many of his friends that if you don't let him go, you'll regret it for the rest of your life because that dream will always be there. Yeah. So if you let him go out, let him see what it's like in the smoke, let him have a go, he'll come back of his own free will. And that's exactly what happened.
So you had your little adventure, but then you came back to help.
Well, you know, I always came back every weekend. That's why I chose Aberdeen, because it was far enough for me to go, but I could come back to my family every weekend.
Yeah. Well, what about where the family is originally from? Have you been back there?
I've been back on 3 occasions.
Okay.
I went the first time when I was 7. Mm-hmm. I went back 2 years later when I was 9. And I went back 12 years later after that when I was about 21, 22.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I imagine there was obviously a world of difference between here and there.
Oh, there was it was like going into the TARDIS and going back in time. I mean, the things we were doing at school in history, I was seeing in real life for the first time. It was like amazing.
Wow.
It was like, it really was like a TARDIS. It was like going back in time, you know.
Is it something where it sort of teaches you to appreciate what you've got here?
Absolutely. You know, I think that's probably one of the best experiences for anybody is to see what real poverty is like. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the United Kingdom, a lot of people think poverty is totally associated with the word money. But poverty is actually associated with rights as well, mm-hmm. where you can, you know, if you're rich, you can do something. If you're not rich, you don't do something. If you're rich, it extends to today, for example. You know, if you ask somebody like what George Bush's dog's called or what the Downing Street cat's called, they know all about that, but they don't know about somebody dying at the other end of the world. They wouldn't know the first name about that. That's poverty.
Yeah. Does Downing Street have a cat?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. the things I don't know. Right.
It's there to catch the mice.
It's interesting you mention poverty. I often think of poverty as a mindset sometimes that maybe creates bad habits.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
You know, I would always say that your dreams have no limitation.
Right.
But sometimes life just throws you a bad curve. And,
yeah.
you know, it's very difficult sometimes to get out that bad curve. If everybody's in the same boat and the boat keeps heading towards the rocks, there's not very much you can do.
Yeah, that's very true. What's a success from your perspective in terms of business and your work?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Okay. People define success in different ways. For some of them, it's obviously going to be financial. For some of them, it's going to be something outside of the business sphere. In terms of business, where does it rest with you? And I guess success is something that makes us happy. I feel satisfied.
Well, I was just going to say that the one thing that success I think should be related to is happiness, and your own happiness can be judged by whatever you want it to be. Now, whether that's financial reward, that's fine. But financial reward, I got this wrong a long time ago. You know, when you're sometimes down, you always think to yourself, right, we've got to make more money, we've got to make more money, we've got to make more money.
Yep.
I was reminded by many of my customers, a lot of them who care deeply about me. You know, watch what you're doing because your health's very important.
It's true.
And if you continue the way you're going to continue, just remember that when you're in hospital, the customers only want you for the stuff and the prices that you actually produce. So you can't sell a bed while you're lying in a bed in hospital, although I'll try. The only people that are going to come and visit you are your family.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
Make sure that you keep them close. Make sure that you.
Were you overworking at the time? Then were you working too hard?
Yes, I was doing. I can't remember how many hours a day.
Too many.
Yeah.
It's a sort of thing that at the end of the day you just kind of collapse in bed and then get up and.
A good friend of mine actually watched me, and he'd been watching me every day because I bumped into him at the same time, and I would go from job to job. And he pulled me to one side and said, "If you continue like this," he says, "you know, I can honestly see, I don't think I'll see you in a couple of years' time."
Wow.
But I was lucky because somebody came along and they leased a restaurant. And that was the end. I never really wanted to go into restaurants, to be honest, but you know, my dad got me into a lot of different things, and it was
come on, son, come on. Yeah.
If he got into things, and basically we had to go and defend. You know, it wasn't a case now of this is a great idea. Yeah, Dad, have you thought this one out? Yeah, no, you haven't. You've just gone ahead and done it. So now that we've done it, we're going to have to make a success at it. So you know, we'll do everything it takes to make sure it becomes a success.
But it must have been exciting to be around someone like that who's going to throw you some curveballs.
Well, my background is very, very lucky. I'm very fortunate in that I have been around so many millionaires. It's unbelievable. And they all come from a very poor background. I think one of the most lasting impressions I've ever had in my life was when I was with my uncles and my father, who all come from the same village. And like I said, my uncles are multimillionaires long before most people were. And I remember once at the age of 18, 19, going down to Glasgow to sit down and speak to them. And I'll never forget when they were in this big fancy office and this massive import-export business, and turning around and they were saying, and they started talking about times when they were kids. And I found this fascinating because my dad never really spoke about his life and when he was younger or anything. So I mean, you know, for me to actually hear it for the first time about how my dad was younger, and what the antics he got up to was quite interesting. And the fact that these guys kicked off their shoes. I still do it today, just in memory of all those guys. Kicked off their shoes, told their secretaries they were having a bit of private time, shut the doors, and had a bit of fun, and remembered the time when they were poor. But when you're poor, you make your own fun.
Yeah.
And these guys went into stories, and I was just completely in awe. I thought, wow. If you were to see these guys and know these guys, you would not know that background at all.
It's also great that they're able to make a success of things.
Oh, I think that a lot of the Asian community and a lot of the immigrants, that success story is not really told very well. I mean, today people go into Asda and they go into 24-hour shopping. Their predecessors were the Asian shops that were used to open 24 hours. Yep. Who were they manned by? The owner, his wife, and the kids. And they were doing 8-hour shifts to do 24-hour stores around all the corners. And yet, today, the people that get all the credit for it is Asda, Tesco, Sainsbury's. Yeah. And really, they really should take their hats off to acknowledge the people that went in front of them to headline that success.
Yeah, I remember a little general store that I used to go to when I lived in London, and I think it was run by an immigrant family. Yeah, always running around the shop and stacking the shelves and everything. And I remember asking for something one day. I can't remember what it was. And the guy's like, "What is it that you want?" He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, we don't have it, but we'll get it for you."
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. That's the kind of service that I really wasn't expecting. And it does take it to another level.
These guys worked very, very hard.
Yeah.
They really did. They a lot of them put their life on the line, and they stayed above the shop, stayed next door. Yeah. If the shop got blasted with vandalism, the house got it too.
Yeah. Well, I think once again we're pretty lucky to be able to live in a region like we're in and have independent businesses who care about the community enough to bend over backwards to offer services.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, it's our community.
Mm-hmm.
Where you see large multiples closing down and closing their stores without even a bat of an eyelid, because they're only interested in the money.
Yep.
No single entrepreneur or single businessman will do that. They will try to do their very best, even at sometimes personal cost, because there's a personal cost involved in this, and that is the duty and the hours and the sacrifice that you put in. And it's not just me; it's all other businessmen. It's whatever way they actually think and do whatever they want. And again, I think that perhaps that they are in a better position than what we were because they're greatly educated. Their forefathers were greatly educated. We came from nothing. Absolutely nothing. We know what it is to have nothing. I have a modest living. I try and always have a modest living. As you can see, looking around you, this is just to remind myself more than anything else.
I can see why you do that, and I think it's for the right reasons as well.
My children are different, very much different. I mean, they're very, very British. I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of what I stand for. And I love the marriage of the two cultures. I remember being 18 when I was asked at school, how are you going to live your life? Yeah. And I thought, that's an interesting question. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to live my life with the best of the best. And that encompasses taking the best out of the Western world, taking the best out of the Eastern world, kicking out the bad of the Western world, and kicking out the bad of the Eastern world, and just keeping all the good.
That sounds like a good idea to me.
Cliff Richard.
Ah, singer? Yes.
Yeah, Cliff Richard is Indian. He's more Indian than I am.
Is he?
Yeah. Like Cliff Richard has an Indian passport.
Really?
He's born in India.
I did not know that.
Right.
Wow.
So
is he like...
His parents were in India when he was born.
Okay.
So I watched one day, and I wanted to say this. I watched one day, I came up and I put on Samson Sunday. You know,
Is that
the
some-
Gospels on Sunday, you know, the church program and things like that.
Oh, okay.
And Cliff Richard's a big Christian,
Okay.
big Christian fan.
Right.
And I put the program on halfway through or something like that, and so I had no idea what they were talking about. But I noticed Cliff Richard. And Cliff Richard's written an awful lot but in the Indian press because of
His history.
AA and his history and all the rest. He goes back quite a lot as well.
Okay.
And he has many, many Indian friends.
Wow.
And I can't remember what was actually said, but I mean, I spotted him, and I knew from the Indian press how big he was there. And of course, you know, I grew up in Cliff Richard. We all want a summer holiday, don't we?
Classic. It's
classic.
a classic.
One of my favourite songs. You know, Cliff Richard and the Shadows. You know, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I mean, all his songs are brilliant.
Yeah.
And he's a devout Christian. And what happened there was the minister, for some reason, I don't know what the conversation was about, but he said something like, do you believe in Christmas? And of course he answered that, yes, I do. And I remember watching that, and I was about to change the channel, and I thought, but this is Cliff Richard speaking. He's not going to leave it at that. And Cliff Richard turned around and said, yes, I believe in Christmas. Yes, I believe in Easter. But I also celebrate Diwali with my Hindu friends. I also celebrate Eid with my Muslim friends. You know what? I party 6 times a year. You only party twice. Who do you think's got the better deal?
There you go. There you go. Great point. Didn't think we'd be talking about Cliff Richard today. I do like those old films, though. They got a certain kind of swing and style to them that you don't see today. What is it that you enjoy most about the work that you do?
I like seeing the smile on customers' faces.
Right.
I love seeing the smile on the customers' faces when they get what they actually want, and they're happy with what they've got.
Yeah. And
they're delighted with their purchase, and they'll recommend us. I just love that aspect of it.
Because you've been here for so long, do you get like generational customers, like the parents came?
Absolutely. We get it's changing slightly now with the internet, and that's why we wanted to sort of like push on that, because it's a new generation that's on there. As I explained with my son when you were talking about, you know, where you get electrical appliances. So that generation, which they call Generation Z, is changing completely. So they don't want to do store visits and things like that, but they'll easily check it out. You know, and that's fine. That's fine. You know, it's just a new way of communication. You know, I'm a technologist. I love technology. So, you know, you know, like my uncle said, you know, first you had the wired radio, then you had the wireless radio, then you had this, what do they call it? The cassette, the Walkman. Sorry, Walkman cassette. Then you had the Apple iPod, then you had the Apple iPhone. And it's going to continuously keep changing.
Oh, absolutely. And business people have to be ready for it.
Absolutely, you know. Communication is always going to change. You know, my father used to get letters by airmail. You know, today they can phone from one end of the world to the other end and WhatsApp for free.
It's stunning. Like, you can Skype with somebody on the other side of the world instantly.
I remember when I was speaking to my brother-in-law in Dubai, and we had webcams.
Right.
And it was the first time ever, before even Sky, that I'd ever actually seen. It was pitch dark here because it was early hours in the morning, and the sun was rising there, and I thought that was fascinating. I used to think it was he'd the light on or something like that. And his son was my nephew was very young at the time, and I'll never forget. He picked up the webcam and stuck it in his mouth, and it suddenly went from this early rising sun morning to pitch dark. I thought, well, you know what? It's just the same as here. And then suddenly, after a couple of minutes, communication broke down and everything, and eventually it got taken out of his mouth and it cleaned, and it was back up again. I thought, oh, we've seen the sun now, so the sun must be rising there. And then again, he stuck it in his mouth again. And eventually, my brother-in-law said, we're going to have to cancel this. It's not working.
It takes a while to get used to the...
They're built-in webcams now, so you don't have so many problems.
Okay, yeah. I let my son play with my laptop, and didn't have any keys left after 5 minutes. He just ripped them all off it. It's like, oh, that's not a good idea. Oh, well.
Can't do that with iPad because it's touchscreen.
That's what you think. The kids are always going to find a way.
Yeah, they're going to find a way around it.
Yeah. Thinking about your work, we talked about success and what you enjoy. What are the hard parts?
The hard parts are obviously when things go wrong.
Okay.
You know, and you've got a deadline, and that happens every year at Christmas when you're fighting a deadline. But
is that deadlines for deliveries or?
Yeah, deadlines with deliveries, and when you can't actually get stuff, and somebody sort of I remember I learned an important lesson when I was speaking to one of my work colleagues, and I'd blown a fuse because, which didn't happen very often, but I'd blown a fuse because this had actually gone so wrong. And I'll never forget, she turned around and said, "Look, listen, hang on 2 seconds. I can't achieve anything if you're shouting at me because I can't understand what you're saying."
Yeah.
And she said, "Count to 10. Calm down and tell me what the problem is, and I'll see what we can do." And what actually had happened was the computer labeling was the wrong thing, and had been sent up with the wrong thing 3 times. And it was human error. You know, they put the labels on the wrong thing, so every time it got scanned, it got scanned to the wrong code. But it was the wrong colour, it was the wrong floor, it was just an abysmal mess. But it took a human to come in and tell the warehouse staff that was actually wrong. And this pack needed to go out right. And she did that.
Well, recognizing the error, is the first stage in solving the problem.
And the thing is, if you do get something wrong, okay, we're all human.
Yeah.
And life's not perfect. And everybody tries to get everything right the majority of the time.
So how should a business approach mistakes that inevitably happen? My God, I make mistakes on a daily basis, right? So I'm pretty.
Who doesn't?
Yep. So I'm pretty sure there's, if there's somebody out there who's like part of a larger business and they've got offices in different places, you can be sure somebody somewhere is not doing something right.
Because we're small, we can move faster.
Right.
So one of the huge inspirations is Muhammad Ali.
Yep.
Right.
It's not a family.
No. I wish he was, but he claimed some royalties. But no. But Muhammad Ali is a great inspiration for me, and he did one where he was, I think he was boxing. He was interviewed boxing George Foreman or Joe Frazier. I think it was Joe Frazier actually, and he's interviewed. And at the interview, he's asking how he's going to beat him. And he turns around and says, he's so slow. He's so slow. I'm so fast. I'm so handsome. I'm so quick. I'm so... Have you seen him box? Have you seen him box? He's like this. And he moves like a robot, a slow robot. Yeah. That's what he's like. That's what big companies are like. We're nimble, soft on our feet, quick, adaptable to change. Most small businesses are, because they're at the cold front all the time.
Okay. What are the secrets, if there are any, of furniture industry? Right? Are there things that you get to see on the inside of that industry that other people don't know about? And I say that because I'm in a new flat and I have to think about getting some furniture. So I'm looking for some personal advice here about, what to look for, what to avoid.
Well, today I was selling a bed, and parental choice came into it, and something, every industry has their own tech speak.
Right.
When I did accountancy, there was a book that went out, and it was called The Bluffer's Guide.
Right.
And it was absolutely brilliant. And these Bluffer's Guides were designed that if you were ever invited to a dinner, that you could actually talk about certain industries as though you knew what you were talking about, but it was just summaries.
All right, so just like how to lie, basically.
Well, basically, yes, but with important, because every industry has its own tech speak.
Oh, right, yeah.
So there was a Bluffer's Guide to accountancy, Bluffer's Guide to lawyers, Bluffer's Guide to solicitors, Bluffer's Guide to...
Keywords.
Keywords. And every industry has them.
Yeah.
And I bought the accountancy one, and actually, it was absolutely brilliant because it helped me quite a lot. Doing summary what I wanted to do in accountancy, and it covered it in layman's terms very, very easily, and in English, not in techno speak. And every industry has that. I think it's just to try and I think if you're in an industry, you sometimes forget that other people outside that industry don't actually understand what you're saying.
So to speak to the people in their language, basically.
Yeah. Anybody can speak gobbledygook, confuse you, but nobody wants to. The trouble is the majority of the people want to know what they're talking about, but they don't want to let on they don't know. And you can learn more by being dumb than being clever.
Yeah, like when you admit that you don't know, you open yourself to learning. Something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting for me about your business is this furniture, flooring, and mobility. These three things together, and the mobility element as well. So how does that all tie together?
Well, that's quite an interesting story. We've always done mobility from day one. We've always done electric beds, and we've always done electric rise recliners. But we misunderstood the benefit of these products. It all began with my mother, actually, who in her age was starting to get a little bit older. We have many elderly customers, and I was particularly aware of two sisters who used all the mobility equipment to the full. They were like headmistresses style, very firm. I used to go to their home quite a bit because as they were gradually getting more and more infirm, I had to take catalogues up and show them stuff because they couldn't visit the store. And I noticed that they would have a rollator or a walker, as they call them, the three-wheel walkers.
Right.
My mother had a Zimmer.
Okay.
And if a fixed Zimmer takes up a lot of space, especially if you're sitting on a settee, you need it to get back up again.
Yeah.
And it reduces the environment space as well. And we were a big family, and people kept tripping over my mother's Zimmer. And
Can imagine.
I thought to myself, forget my mother's. We're going to have we're going to have a whole hospital full here if I don't do something quickly. So I remember spotting this rollator things in my customer's home. So I thought, well, I'll have to get one of them, but I don't know anything about them. At that time, there used to be two mobility stores locally in Elgin.
Right.
And my mother used to wear an astronaut's boot. One of them was on an industrial estate, so my mother could go there because she'd twist her foot. And the other one used to be in the centre in Elgin, in the shopping centre in Elgin. And I had to walk from the old Powderland all the way there. And I thought, how can my mum walk from here to there? This is defeating the purpose. Anyway, I didn't know anything about these things, but I do remember getting a letter from the company saying that they'd been taken over by a full mobility company.
Right.
So I asked them about these things, and they told me virtually nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean, I don't know anything about them. They come in different colours, they come in different shapes, they all have three wheels. I mean, I had no idea. Okay. And this is where most people actually come into it at a difficult age. The thing about the mobility industry is very, very fickle. So you could be in a rise, and you might not have a sale for about 4 months, which is why most mobility stores go out of business. Right. We're lucky because it was an add-on to our business. So, it's not something that we really, really need, but it's something that there's a need for out there.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the thing is, like, development with technology goes quite far. So you've got scooters, you've got electric wheelchairs, you've got self-propelled wheelchairs, and there's a phantom of technology developing on that front. And we take a great interest in that. Before I said to you, I love customer service. I love seeing people's smiles on their faces. And we hire wheelchairs, for example.
Oh, wow.
We never intended on hiring wheelchairs, but when we see that... when we see that smile on that person's face, when we get the letters in that so-and-so has died and they remembered you, and that chair reminds them of you, and we haven't seen that customer for maybe 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it just lifts my spirits phenomenally.
That's nice. And also you never know when you're going to need something.
When we first went into mobility, there was a local gentleman who was very young at the time and made a complete and utter fool of the fact that we were doing this thing. And I said to him, "Look, listen, it's because of your age that you're deciding that you're not you don't need this equipment." And at the moment, I would make a fool of anything like this because you just never know. You can never say never in life. Yeah. And the funny thing about that conversation was, which I remember, it was years back. The funny thing about that was he fell off the roof and almost broke his back. So 2 months later, he was inquiring about a scooter. It was the very same scooter that he was making a fool of.
Yeah, karma, right?
Yeah,
karma comes back to hit you. Yeah. Right? Don't mess with it. Is there any advice that you could give to people interested in being an entrepreneur or getting involved in starting up their own business, as you've got this sort of long history of experience?
Learn the trade somehow.
Okay.
Whether you get in at the front door, there's a lifetime of experiences right out there. This is one. Right. For example, and everything in life is a massive experience. And the one thing that I always go on about is the word education. Education is associated with the word school and colleges. Yep. School, colleges, and university are associated with education, and they are important. They are a very, very important part of life. Don't get me wrong, but there is an element there that also is called life experiences, which actually can shape the person. Yep. Now, what shapes a person? Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of different things that shape a person. I think things like their parents. I think the grandparents. Yep. I think the life current experiences that they've got and what they're actually exposed to. Yep. And all those put together will depend on what you become. But at the end of the day, everybody in life has a dream. Everybody's born with an interest, I think. And, my interest at the age of 10 was books. I always wanted to profess and still have my own private library. And I was into non-fiction at an early age. I don't know why this is, but I've no idea. And of course now the iPads have come along, and now all the books are on the cloud and on Amazon and Kindle. But you know what? I still like my books because I have always had a dream of taking somebody through my library and showing them all the different books that I've got.
There is something still about the book, and I don't know if it's...
you don't need electric.
That's true. I don't know if it's a generational thing as well, but I'm a book person. I can have a tablet with 1,000 books in it, but it doesn't compare to having one real book with those pages that you can flick and turn.
The book industry is growing.
Yeah?
More than anything else. I mean, they thought they would... Look at the record industry. The record industry as well. They wrote off records, and yet records are back.
Quality of sound, I believe.
Quality of sound, see, feel, touch. You don't get an album cover on a CD.
Yeah. And
that's part of it.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's art.
Yeah.
It's a big piece of art.
We can't sign it. Exactly. Yeah. You just said it yourself. It's a piece of art.
Yeah.
The collectibles.
Yeah. Something really nice about a bookshelf as well. I don't know what it is, but there's just something, oh, look, a bookshelf. That's really nice. And you
noticed it during COVID, didn't you?
Yeah.
Nearly every presenter had a book. Because I don't know whether half of that was 3D or whether that was green screen, but everybody seemed to have a bookshelf.
Yeah,
or they were only speaking to that generation that had the bookshelf.
It just makes a nice backdrop, I think, for a lot of people.
For those listening, I also sell bookcases.
Good plug. Good plug. Yeah. There's really something nice about picking up the physical book, and myself and my partner both just enjoyed the physical book. I don't. You can have more information on the tablet, but you just don't connect with it in the same way.
Well, because you're using that very same device for many other things.
Yeah.
Whereas your book, you're focusing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Complete escapism.
Yeah,
Really.
whereas a tablet, you've got to charge it, you got to read the book. You can read it in Audacity. I mean, you could envisage this interview with different voices.
Yep. It's the technical stuff can be a real hassle sometimes. Yeah, there's a great,
Especially if your kid pulls off the keys off all your laptop, it's very difficult to try and read the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
Having said that, my son has also ate some of the pages out my book, so.
Oh well, as long as they were tasty, I suppose.
Just the corners.
Just the corners. Just a wee nibble here and there. Super. Talking about books, are there any books like on a personal level in terms of influence and recommendations that you've read that you think that would be nice for other people to check out?
Wow, there's so many. I mean, it would be a disrespect to name one over the other because there's so many and there's so many good writers. But like I say, learning experiences are from more sometimes than just books. I mean, sometimes it can be from films, sometimes it can be CDs. There's nothing to replace experience better than anything else. But there are certainly a couple that stick in my mind.
What are the first ones that pop into your head?
Well, the first one is The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey. I think that's...
it's a classic, right?
It's a very powerful book.
Do you find a way to implement that into the work that you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily I've got a fantastic memory for the wrong things. It didn't really serve me very well when I was at school, but... I remember things from sometimes way back, and I next time I can't remember what I was saying. It's just the way things sometimes get when you get older.
Important. It's important.
The story in the Stevie Covey book, which most people will probably know, and I might be saying it wrong, is the one of importance or self-importance when you have the American Navy battleship with this officer who's in charge of the whole setup, telling this seaman to identify himself as he's flashing and telling the battleship to move left so many degrees, starboard, or whatever it was. And the battle captain asked him to identify himself, and he turned around and said, well, I rank so much above you in seniority. You will move, not me. And he said, well, I'm sorry, sir, but I can't move, but I suggest you move very quickly. And they went, well, I outrank you 10 to 1 sort of thing. And he turns around and says, but, sir, I can't move. I'm a lighthouse. And then, they're very quickly realizing they're going to, I love that story because, it's a case of, you shouldn't be full of your own importance, ever.
Right.
And a person that speaks to somebody at all levels will know how that person feels. And he can be the dustbin cleaner, he's a customer. He can be the bank manager, he's a customer.
Yeah.
He could be a professional, still a customer.
That's a great point, that being a customer is a great leveler of people.
Yeah.
Because right now...
We always say that it doesn't matter if you buy a £4,000 suite or if you buy a £400 suite. Well, you can't get a suite for £400, but just say the level of spending is £400 to £4,000.
Yeah.
What is it that matters to that individual person? And the thing that really matters to that person is it just took just as long to get that £400 as it did to get to that £4,000.
Yeah.
That person saved every damn penny they could to get it, and they want to give it to you.
Yeah.
They want to give it to you. I mean, they could go somewhere else. Why do they want to give it to you? Are they shopping around for the best deal? Or are they just shopping around for the best quality at the best price? Or are they putting, more importantly, their faith in you to deliver that when you say you can do it? And that's how I like to view it.
Yeah. It's that personal touch that makes all the difference.
And, I always teach my boys, something, how much does it cost to put the lottery on? And the answer at the time was £1. It's now £2. But I mean, prices rise, 100% inflation. Wow. But you could be broke and have absolutely nothing, but you might even find £1 in the gutter walking past and decide to stick it in the lottery. And that person, if treated with respect, could become the next multi-millionaire. And you know something? If you've always been kind to him, he's always going to make sure you go on the same journey as he does.
There's nothing that pays back like kindness, I'm quite sure.
Well, we spoke about karma earlier on. Everybody knows it. Some people just choose to ignore it completely.
Yep. But what goes around comes around. That's my experience anyway.
What goes round comes round,
Yeah. Time travel is possible. Where would you go and why?
Oh.
Boom.
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Just throw that one at you.
Where would I go and why? I would stay in the current time.
Wow.
And the answer behind that would be quite simple, because we are currently in an industrial revolution that's never seen anything like it before. In the 30s, you had the motor car industry, which we know where it is just now. You had the railroad industry. You had the industrial revolution. You had the copper revolution, the stone revolution, but now we're in the computer revolution. And this is going to change absolutely everything to its core.
Do you think society is ready for that?
Society will adapt, as it always does.
Doesn't have a choice, really, does it?
Well, the next big thing is going to be artificial intelligence and robots. So,
how's that going to affect businesses?
Well, it's going to be the age-old story. There's going to be massive unemployment again as machines take over for man. People will be made with low skills will be made redundant. As they get made redundant, hopefully there will be training courses to try and implement the new systems, as always is. If you go back to the time where computers were new and programming was new, and the government assisted with training courses and learning the World Wide Web and how to surf and all the rest of it, because they knew that there was going to be jobs in that front. And that's the same thing that's going to happen again, if it's understood correctly. And we're just going to go from technology to technology to technology. And it's always going to keep going forward.
I think as well, and probably you agree, that there's still a place for all of the traditions as well.
Yes. Absolutely. The thing is, even if you do get likes of iPads and MP3 players or whatever decoding, people are still going to look back to their history.
Yeah.
And they're still going to look back, look, this is a piece of history and recording. and life changes, life moves on. People wonder, history will never dry.
Yeah.
And we learn from our experiences.
It's very, very true. What kind of legacy would you like to leave behind through your work?
That's an easy one.
Okay.
I always wanted to make my parents proud. I still want to make my parents proud. I feel I carry their name, and I feel I carry their legacy. I got a great legacy from my father, my mother, my uncles, my grandfather. And Lossiemouth, my grandfather in Pakistan, all these different people who had so many influences on me, and my friends at school, my teachers, the customers, and I have to live up to that. And I would love to know that I have actually done my dad proud, done my family proud, and that's the most important thing to me in life. If I can leave that, I'll be really, really, really happy.
Wow. I'd like to thank you very much for the time that you've given to me this evening and sharing your knowledge of your business and some information about your history. I'd like to wish you great success with all your endeavors in the future. And if people want to learn more about your business or find out more about Buckie Furniture, Flooring and Mobility, where do they go?
Well, initially they can go to the website, which is www.buckiefurniture.com, or they can go to Facebook, or we particularly do a lot of Facebook Messenger, and on WhatsApp. We're highly approachable, and if there's anything on the back of this that we've said wrong, or I've maybe offended somebody, there's been no intention to do that. I in advance apologise for any of that, but my intention is never to upset anybody, but hopefully if you've gained something out of this, then wow, yeah, it's great. I'm just a guy who happens to have a shop, who happens to be very, very lucky, who happens to have fallen on my father's legacy, who himself was very lucky. I don't think I'm anything special. I'm delighted to have done this interview, which has made me feel special, so thank you very much for the time and effort that you put in.
Oh, no, thank you. I know that I can only do this by standing on the shoulders of the hard work that everybody else has done previously. So, I'm extremely grateful to all of the local businesses and business owners for giving up some of their time, because time is precious for people.
It's an age-old difference between speaking to a small business and a big business. In a big business, you'll never get time of day. You have to go through secretaries, this, that, next thing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And a lot of it will either be history, business connections that the person got there, or the land of opportunity by being at the right place at the right time. But everybody's taken and done the same thing. They've taken the opportunity to actually be there. And you know what? The opportunity to be nice is around every single day in every single way. And if you can smile at somebody and make their day, I'm quite happy. If I say good morning, you don't speak to me, it doesn't bother me any at all. I said good morning, I've done my conscience clear. If you smile back and I've said nothing, it makes my day too.
Super. Once again, thank you very much for your time. I'm really appreciative of it, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you very much, G.
You're very welcome.
Made in Moray is a product of the Academy of Language Therapy and Life Coaching. Book a free online personal or professional development consultation today. What are you waiting for?